I'm Dana Han-Klein here with Andrew Haigh for Lean On Pete.
Did you have any pets or animals growing up?
I had a cat.
You had a cat?
Yes.
Did you have like a close relationship with your cat?
I did love my cat,
Okay.
actually. I had it from about 6, I suppose, onwards. And yeah, I think animals when you're young are like, especially if you're like a lonely kid, they give you lots of like comfort, I suppose, animals. Like they are, you know, they're nice things to have around.
Yeah.
But it's dead now.
Would you say you were a lonely kid?
I don't know. Like, I think, you know, yes. I mean, I think being a kid is quite difficult sometimes. Yeah. So, yeah, I think I was a relatively lonely kid.
Do you think that translated into being connecting with Lean On Pete, probably?
Think, definitely. I think the notion that you don't fit into the world around you, that there's something you're wanting and not being able to get. And, you know, obviously my situation, my background is very different than Charlie's in the film, but that kind of sense of aloneness in the world, I think is something I definitely, when I read the book, kind of felt I understood and had experienced and, you know, wanted to explore, I suppose, a bit more.
Which character do you think you admire the most and why?
Definitely Charlie. I think he has a resilience in the film, which is incredible to me. And in the book, it was the same. There's this sense that life is so tough for this kid. Like everything is falling apart. Family life, you know, he's got no money. He can't even get food in his belly. He's got nothing. And there's no one there to help him, but he does just keep going on. And he's also kind in the process. And I think that was what was really interesting to me about the story, is that, you know, he wants to be cared for by someone and he wants to care for other people and he wants to be a good kid, which I think is really, you know, it's kind of beautiful.
I think one of my favorite resonating moments for me was when he talks about like not wanting to reach out to people for help because he wants to kind of preserve this, you know, image people have of him. Do you have any moments that you were like, yeah, there's a point where I wish I'd like reached out and I didn't?
Well, I think for a lot of people that's a really common experience growing up, especially if you're not like necessarily like other kids around you. Yeah. You're not the coolest one, or you've got like secret, whatever that secret might be.
Sure.
And you know, you don't want to tell your friends or your family. I think it's when you can't speak to your family is the toughest thing, to tell them how you feel. And I think, you know, Charlie comes from a difficult background, from a broken home essentially, and he doesn't want to show his dad that he's afraid. He doesn't want to show his dad that he feels weak or he feels scared, and that's really tough for a kid when you've got to try and be something for your parents that you're not necessarily.
So you found Charlie to play Charlie. What was it sort of that, because it sounded like the process of choosing Charlie was like a long one. So what was like the clincher for you?
It was weird because we interviewed, you know, we auditioned a bunch of kids and they sent tapes in, and I hadn't met Charlie. He was in New York and I was casting in LA, and he sent a tape in of him doing one of the scenes. And me and the casting director just was like, okay, he's probably going to be the kid because he is so good. And he just had something really special about the way he approaches the material and how he approaches a scene. And he tries to find something really different within the scene. And he wrote me a letter just saying how much he loved the script and how much he identified with Charlie and what he thought the story was about. And that's always great to read, you know, especially when you're working with maybe a younger actor. It's really good to know that they understand it on a kind of emotional and an intellectual level of what the story is. And then I watched a film that he'd been in before called King Jack, and he was fantastic in that. And yeah, we saw a few other kids after that, but it was like, nah, Charlie's the one.
When you say letter, do you mean like a literal letter or like an email? Please say it's a literal.
It was, I think, a literal letter. I think it was actually a proper... I want to say that it's a letter. It might have been an email, but I think a letter sounds better.
If you could go back to before you started filming and give yourself a piece of advice, would you give yourself any advice?
Advice is almost pointless because it's always always things turn up. Every single day, you think you learn something the day before, and then you go on set the next day and it's completely different. And that's the thing about filmmaking. There's so much that changes. You know, the weather changes what you do. If the sun's out when you thought it was going to be cloudy, it changes what you do. You know, how the actors are feeling that day, how the crew are feeling that. There's so much that changes. And in the end, every day you're just trying to get the best scene that you can possibly get under certain circumstances. I think always, if I could go back, I'd say just enjoy it more, because I think when you finish it, you're like, oh, that was really good fun. But in the moment, you're like, oh God, this is so stressful. So I think always I wish that I would, if I could go back and say, just relax more and enjoy it. Don't worry so much.
So speaking of changes, what do you think the biggest change was from the first iteration of the screenplay to the final thing on film? Because obviously a lot changes from the book to the screenplay, but...
it's about working out what is important, I suppose, and what is less important. So we shot, the scenes that we shot that aren't in the film that you feel like are incredibly important when you're writing. This is such an essential scene, and then you realise, oh, it's not, and you can take it out. So there's always those things, but also it becomes a thing by itself. The actors start to develop their characters. They become something slightly different than what you maybe imagined before. So that's what's so interesting about making films. You have a vision of something, and if you try and stick to that vision too closely, you're probably just going to be disappointed. So you try and adapt as the film adapts.
What do you think the most either emotionally or logistically challenging scene was?
The most logistically challenging scene is something that happens to the horse during the film.
The answer to that one.
That was a really logistically very tricky scene. It's one shot essentially, and we're doing it at sunset, so you have 20 minutes to get it, and so it was logistically very, very difficult. Anything involving horses and a kid and a car and bikes.
They never say work with animals or children.
No.
Let's put them both in a film.
Let's put them both in a film.
Moment.
Yeah, and in a really difficult moment. And I think so. That was a really difficult scene to pull off, but also emotionally it was tough. It was it was tough for Charlie, and so that was a tricky scene. But it's often the scenes that you expect are going to be really easy end up being more challenging. Sometimes it is just two people sitting in a room talking. You have to get them right just as much as you have to get a technically challenging scene right. So it's often those things you think are going to be, it's an easy day today, I've just got two people sitting in a kitchen talking. That ends up being as difficult as, a horse race.
Speaking of horse races, what would your racehorse name be?
Do you know what? I did work it out and I can't remember what it was. I'm going to say Dusty Cabins.
I like it.
But I also think that would be a good drag queen name. So I think it's probably the same thing. I think it'd be both a drag queen name and a horse name.
What would the drag song be for Dusty
Oh
Cabins?
God, it would be something like old school kind of, I don't know, maybe even some country and western type of song.
I can see Dolly Parton being a good.
Okay, there you go. It's a Dolly Parton song. And 95 is my favourite film, so
there we go.
There you go.
Now they're making a sequel or remake, something like that.
Are they? That's a tragedy.
But Dolly's involved, so it's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
What inspires you?
I don't know what inspires. I suppose it's just wanting. I love making films. It's a relatively stressful thing to be doing, but I love making them. So what inspires me, I suppose, is just there's a moment when you think, this is what I want to do. This is the film I want to make. This is the story I want to tell. That is inspiring, and that makes you want to do the best work you can do to try and get that done. But then lots of things inspire me, people, places, so much. And then so much makes me miserable as well.
Well, I was going to say, what frustrates you?
Oh, well, that's a lot of things frustrate me. We live in a very, very frustrating world where every day, I think it's becoming more frustrating, and I'm certainly becoming angrier as the world seems to move forward. I'm angrier about things and people. And
I feel bad.
Yep, I think everyone feels that.
What's one thing you wish you had more time for?
Holidays would be nice. I think I'd like to have more time just to it's funny, before you've made your first film, you have the whole of your life leading up to that point, thinking about the film you want to make, all that kind of thing. You have a lot more time, and then you start making films and it all kind of gets jammed up. So sometimes I'd like a bit more time just to think a bit more clearly, maybe.
What is some of the best advice you've received?
I think it's probably just not to listen to too many opinions about your own work. Once the film is out, then you have to listen to people's opinions because the film is out. But in the early days, I try and not listen to too many people. So I don't show too many people my scripts. I don't show people rough cuts of the film. I try and just, because it's very hard to keep in your head what it is you're trying to do. Too many voices can disturb that. So I try and just stay true to what I want to do.
What's some of the worst advice you've received? I like polar opposite questions.
God, the worst advice is probably don't give up what you're doing, is probably what the worst advice is. Because I think other people always will probably tell you, I think you should just stop doing this now. You're not going to make, I didn't make a film until I was in my, late 20s. I'm now 45. And so to start with, there's a lot of years of thinking, I want to do this. And everyone's like, no, do something else, be sensible. Why can't you get a proper job, get an order job? It's all those kind of things. and you just sort of ignore that advice.
If filmmaking was not an option for you, right? If you had to be sensible, what do you think you'd be doing? Just be sensible.
I always wanted, when I was younger, I wanted to either be an architect or design roller coasters. So I used to spend hours and hours, I know, hours and hours drawing roller coasters and designing what they would be, which I think is quite similar to making films, actually. And so being an architect, they're all the same kind of thing. Basically complete control freak, trying to build a whole environment and being controlling of that environment.
Yeah, there's a lot of technical and hopefully fun
exactly,
things.
Hopefully fun, yeah, and terrifying.
What's your favourite roller coaster?
There's one in Blackpool in England called the Big One. I like that one. I'm too old to go on them now. They hurt my head, my brain rattles around. I don't go on them anymore, but I used to love them when I was younger.
Growing up, who was your favourite fictional childhood hero or heroine?
I always liked Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. I always liked them when I was a kid. There was a TV show that used to be on in the 70s, it must be, God now, about them, and I always loved what they were getting up to.
Do you have any hidden talents?
Oh, not really. I'm quite good at sounding like the Bee Gees when I sing, and don't ask me to do that because I'm not going to do that.
I can't remember the right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fine.
Yeah, I've got a surprisingly good falsetto voice. I can't sing at all in any other way, shape or form, but that I'm quite good at.
What would your go-to karaoke song be, aside from Dusty Cabin's version, your go-to karaoke song?
I hate karaoke, so I don't do it. But I would say, I'll go for the Bee Gees, How Deep Is Your Love?
That's getting to show
exactly.
off here.
Yeah.
If there's sort of one thing you hope people take away from the film, obviously you hope they take many things away, but if you could...
I suppose I hope that people take away that, life is very, very difficult for people, especially when they have no money, and no security, and no stability, and life is very challenging, and that the best thing we can do is have compassion for that and try and understand that, and where we can help that.
My last question is, how do you define success?
Success, I suppose, is feeling like you are doing what you want to do. So it's certainly not about money or, how many people see your film even. It's like, if you have a dream of wanting to do something and you can achieve that in whatever way that is. Like, I feel just as successful with the bigger film as I did when I made a 2-minute short that 6 people saw. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that felt like a success to me. Like that, I suppose, if you're just achieving what it is that you want to achieve, is success.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Congrats on the film.
Thank you.